So what about changes in supply and demand that happen at the same time? So this gets more complicated to analyze. When there's a demand change or a supply change and they happen independently or just one at a time, then a business economist is able to qualitatively forecast what's going to happen to price and quantity. But if supply and demand is shifting at the same time, the effect on price or quantity is going to depend on the magnitude of the shift. Okay, so to see that, the book provides an example for us. An earthquake hits Kobe, Japan, and the decreased supply of fermented rice, and that decreases the supply of fermented rice used to make sake wine. And let's say the stress caused by the earthquake leads a lot of people to want to drink more sake wine and other alcohol. So what's going on in the market? Okay, so here's a messy diagram. So let's try to piece this out one at a time. Piece all these curves out one at a time. So like every market diagram, we've got quantity on the horizontal axis and price on the vertical. Okay, and a market analysis like this should always start with demand 0 and supply 0. Okay, or you could start with demand 1 and supply 1. Okay, but the lowest number tells you the initial situation. So in this case, supply 0 and demand 0, where they intersect is at point A. Equilibrium quantity is Q0, equilibrium price is P0. Okay, so what we're seeing here is that the demand increases from D0 to D1. Okay, but the supply shock, there's some uncertainty about it. Okay, it could be relatively small. The supply curve could be from supply 0 to supply 1, or it could be large from supply 0 to supply 2. Okay, so the demand increase leads to an increase in price. A supply decrease also leads to an increase in price. So we know without a doubt the price of sake wine is going to go up. Okay, but we don't know how high it's going to increase. And we also don't know the effect on equilibrium quantity. If the supply shock is small, we would move to equilibrium B, where the new demand curve and the new supply curve intersect. And at that new equilibrium quantity increases. But if the supply curve is large, then we move to the equilibrium where the intersection of demand 1 and supply 2 intersect. That's point C. So at point C, the price increase is even larger than P0 to P1. It's P0 to P2, and the equilibrium quantity falls to Q2. Okay, so without some additional information, maybe about the numbers behind these demand and supply curves, we don't know what's going to happen to equilibrium quantity. Okay, and a similar thing can happen if we're certain about the supply shift, but uncertain about the demand shift. Okay, so just imagine this, going to make this diagram even more complicated. Imagine we're certain about the small supply shift, but the demand increase could be small. In that case, we'd be sure the price would go up, but we wouldn't know about the equilibrium quantity. And a similar thing can happen where we're sure about the quantity, but unsure about the price.